Today was the day it became clear that the SEC is waging a broad slow motion war to exterminate as much of crypto as it can at whatever pace it can. And Cardano is one of its targets. Ready? Let's go. This is a big turning point for a lot of crypto, including Cardano. So today we're going to discuss how we're in a war now. We've got a lot of allies and we've got one big enemy. If you looked at this image and you knew this is the time when we should all realize we're in it together, or if you're finding value in these videos each weekday, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. Today was the big day. Today was the day the SEC did some things that we've been expecting for a long time and did some other things we weren't expecting as much. So today the SEC filed a complaint against Binance, some various Binance entities, and CZ personally. So the part that shocked a lot of people in Cardano came up because obviously if they're going to call Binance a securities exchange, they need to say that they were trading some securities on the Binance platforms, and those were going to be crypto assets. They were going to declare securities. And obviously, a lot of different assets are traded on the Binance platform. And the SEC, if they wanted to make things a little bit easier on themselves, they could have just named, some smaller assets that very readily kind of fit the Howey test definition of an investment contract, so they could declare those securities. They could have gone after some assets like that and listed those as securities being traded on Binance. But that's not what they did. They named some big assets, some big top 10 assets. So if we go directly to this screenshot of the complaint here, you can see, of course, they named BNB and BUSD, some sort of Binance native assets as securities. That's pretty predictable. But then when you look at the other assets they named, they are Solana, Cardano, Matic, Filecoin, Atom, Sandbox, Decentraland, Algorand, AXS, and Coty. So they could have made it easy and just named a bunch of random crypto assets that are pretty easy to call securities. No. They decided they were going to go after a bunch of big ecosystems, including some top 10 blockchains. So this is the SEC not taking the easy route here so they can just go after Binance. They wanted to go ahead and name a bunch of other blockchains as sort of targets in this crypto security asset witch hunt that this administration is obviously on. I don't even think it's probably even wrong to call it a crypto security asset witch hunt, because it's not really a witch hunt. That implies you've got sort of a misguided mob, calling innocent people witches. That's not what's going on here. This is a very focused campaign to exterminate and suppress as much of crypto as they can at as quick a pace as they possibly can, given the staffing constraints of a regulatory agency like the SEC. They've only got so many people, so many lawyers and other professionals at the SEC who are required to file complaints like this, go through the investigations, send all those subpoenas. They've only got so much staff who can do all that. But I think they're trying to attack and suppress and exterminate as much of crypto as fast as they possibly can. And it looks like in the case of Binance, Binance was trading pretty much, everything notable in crypto, but this is the list of assets that they wanted to go out of their way to declare as securities. So you can see, Cardano has, we're in the trenches here with a bunch of other large entities, large organizations in crypto. We've got Binance, Solana, Matic, Algorand, Sandbox, Decentraland. These are big, well-known institutions in crypto. It's not like it's Cardano and a bunch of small unknown coins. The SEC really wanted to make a point here that they feel like they can go after anybody because I think Gary Gensler's made it clear he thinks everything is a security except maybe Bitcoin. Why isn't Ethereum on this list? We'll talk about that in just a second, but let's get into the rest of the complaint here. So, as usual, I think on this channel we've noted in the past how the SEC, it's odd. They will go into their research will go into very great detail on, very specific sales of assets on certain dates by certain parties, and they'll uncover a lot of information. And then they'll have these glaring general mistakes. Like here, they identify IOHK today as being controlled by Charles Hoskinson and his former partner, who I believe he bought out long ago. Somehow the SEC didn't do enough research to realize that IOHK is no longer controlled by two partners. It's just controlled by Charles Hoskinson. This is a pretty glaring mistake. If anybody reading this complaint, and believe me, a huge number of people at the SEC were probably responsible for fact checking everything in this complaint, but of all those people, nobody realized that this was no longer factually correct. And it's a pretty broad general thing about IOHK. So when it comes to Binance, though, they do have a lot of they're alleging a lot of damning facts, including some quotes from Binance executives. We've talked about some of these in the past, but here they allege is the Binance chief compliance officer back in 2018 saying, "We are operating as an unlicensed securities exchange in the USA, bro." We've talked about some of these quotes in the past, but there's some pretty damning information in here. It's not like the SEC doesn't allege any evidence of securities violations. They have quite a bit going on here with Binance. Coming back to Cardano, as discussed many times on this channel, the Cardano ICO was carried out in Asia. This is a very good fact for Cardano because there was no primary ICO that happened within U.S. jurisdiction. There were no U.S. citizens involved in the ICO on the purchasing end, on the investment end. It didn't happen within the geographic jurisdiction of the U.S. All of that happened in Asia, which was a very smart move by the founding entities of Cardano. But as we've also talked about on this channel, of course, there have been sales in the secondary markets in Cardano. Those founding entities were granted a small amount of the initial token supply, 16.7%, according to the SEC complaint, of the initial token supply went to the three founding entities. And they allege, of course, that there have been sales of that initial sort of provision of tokens to those founding entities. There have been sales of those tokens into the secondary markets since then to sort of fund the development of the Cardano ecosystem. And here, right in the complaint, they actually used the image of the Cardano roadmap showing the phases of development of Cardano that we're all so familiar with. So they're in the Cardano section, they go into all this detail because they're trying to do what they always do. They're trying to establish that these crypto assets are securities because they're investment contracts, according to the SEC allegations, under the Howey test. So quick review, we won't go into too much detail. I don't want to bore you to death here, but you'll remember the Howey test has 4 prongs: an investment of money in a common enterprise with the expectation of profit to be derived from the efforts of others. And here is what the SEC sort of implies about Cardano. They just sort of do this in the facts section of their complaint. They don't really get into too much analysis. They just sort of lay out the facts in the complaint. And, they kind of imply some things if you understand, where they normally go with these kinds of facts. So here's what I would say they're implying here. As to prong 1, they're obviously saying that sales by the founding entities into the secondary markets, the purchasers there were making an investment of money. So this is kind of a different kind of argument. Usually the SEC has gone after the the ICO thing, which is sort of a primary sell. Usually they don't have to rely on the secondary markets for this investment of money thing. So this is some new territory for the SEC in crypto. Here they have to talk about the secondary markets, not a primary ICO. This is part of the brilliance of Cardano. We're instantly in sort of a different category here. Then we have prong number two. Was it an investment of money in a common enterprise? Yeah, I mean, obviously they're going to say that the Cardano network is a common enterprise. Number three, what was there an expectation of profits? They're going to say the buyers in the secondary markets had an expectation of profits due to information provided by the founding entities. And right in the complaint, they say the information publicly disseminated by Cardano, IOHK, and Emergo, including since the initial sales of ADA, have led ADA holders, including those who purchased ADA since November 2017, that would be in the secondary markets, reasonably to view ADA as an investment and expect a profit. And that one's, kind of hard to argue. Yeah, people buying ADA are probably hoping to make a profit on the ADA. Number four, was it a profit to be derived from the efforts of others? They're going to argue the profits were to be based on the efforts of the founding entities, and they go to some length to describe those efforts by the Cardano Foundation, IOHK, and Emergo. What's interesting here is that they're kind of just picking and choosing. It's not like they're laying out some kind of a criteria like, hey, this is what a security is in crypto, this is what a security is not. They've got some material on their website where they sort of pretend to do that. But in this complaint, that's not what they're doing. They're just sort of picking and choosing facts that they want to include in their complaint so that they can try to use those later to establish that these assets are securities. So with Solana, we find them using something kind of interesting. The SEC cites the use of a burn mechanism in Solana as creating an expectation of profits for Howey prong number three. They say, as explained on the Solana website, since the Solana network was launched, the total current supply of SOL has been reduced by the burning of transaction fees in a planned token reduction event. This marketed burning of SOL as part of the Solana network's deflationary mechanism has led investors reasonably to view their purchase of SOL as having the potential for profit to the extent there is a built-in mechanism to decrease the supply and therefore increase the price of SOL. This is interesting. The SEC is taking the position here that a burning mechanism helps them to establish the expectation of profits required for prong three of the Howey test. So that, of course, Ethereum has a similar deflationary mechanism that accomplishes some amount of, deflation via burning. So why wasn't Ethereum mentioned among the assets that the SEC says were offered and sold as securities? So obviously you can come up with many possible explanations for this, but one very practical explanation may be just that the SEC does not want to have to maneuver around the Hinman speech and emails as in the Ripple litigation. I think this was probably very high on the list. Obviously, in Ripple, one of the biggest problems for the SEC has been the Hinman speech and emails. And, we've been hearing for a long time that those were eventually going to become public. Those were going to be unsealed eventually in the Ripple case because, if you're interested in everything that's going on in the Ripple case, there is so much information on Twitter about that. We won't even go into it here. But I think this might be a big reason. The XRP litigation has definitely, I think, not gone in the direction that the SEC wanted it to. It's been a huge consumer of the energy and sort of just work scope of the SEC staff. I don't think they want another event where they have to go through all of the Hinman speech and email issues like they have in the Ripple litigation. So this is a very practical reason why the SEC may not have gone after Ethereum, because we have all of these issues that they're already busy trying to avoid in the Ripple litigation. So if the Hinman speech and emails are unveiled, I saw reports even today that they would be unveiled possibly next week. If they are unveiled next week, then maybe this goes out the window. So here's something about the SEC's allegations regarding Binance that might be kind of surprising for some people. The SEC alleges that a CZ-controlled entity engaged in wash trading to inflate volume. And here we get into some pretty serious allegations that are sort of separate from the security status of assets like Cardano on the Binance platform. They say, in fact, wash trading on the Binance.us platform did occur and went undetected. Much of this wash trading occurred through numerous accounts affiliated with Sigma Chain, an entity owned and controlled by CZ and operated by Binance employees at CZ's direction. Interestingly, an asset mentioned in the SEC's allegations around wash trading is COTI. So note here that this seems to be about things the CZ-controlled entity Sigma Chain did, and not about anything COTI was doing. They're just talking about COTI being the asset that Sigma Chain, a CZ-related entity, was wash trading. So when I went through this section, and I have not read every single word of this complaint, I sort of went through and picked out the points that jumped out at me today, but I have not seen anything implying anything about COTI's actions with regard to this COTI asset. This was all about things that Binance did. So this is not any kind of a black mark on COTI at all. This is just COTI just happens to be the asset, apparently, that they're alleging Sigma Chain was wash trading. So this is not as I didn't read anything herein that seemed to be bad about COTI. This was all about COTI just happening to be the asset that was being wash traded by Sigma Chain. So the allegations of wash trading included significant time periods when there were important funding rounds and other investments in Binance. So specifically, there was a seed funding round in this Binance entity, BAM Trading, during a period where they're alleging that significant wash trading was happening. So here's how much wash trading they're talking about. With one asset, they're saying that in the first hour of trading of a newly listed asset, 99% of the volume of that asset was wash trading. By the end of the day, wash trading by apparently Sigma Chain accounts amounted to nearly 70% of that asset's total volume. So on the first day that this asset was listed, 70% of the trading in that asset that day was wash trading to artificially pump up the volume of that asset. So these wash trading allegations are pretty serious in the context of equity investments in Binance and or other CZ-controlled entities during these periods. And the SEC went as far as to use the word fraud here. They said, as a result of these transactions, practices, and course of business that operated as a fraud or deceit upon purchasers of securities and of their numerous material misstatements and omissions, BAM Trading and BAM Management obtained substantial revenue from the transaction fees that crypto asset investors paid for trading on the Binance.us platform and the approximate $200 million that equity investors invested in BAM Management. So the SEC is alleging fraud here. This fraud due to the wash trading. This isn't just about certain crypto assets being securities. They're also saying, sort of separately, that Binance and these, certain of these entities, including some entities they allege are CZ-controlled entities, they're alleging that those entities may have committed fraud. So unsurprisingly, the Binance staking program is also alleged to be a security. Interesting to note here, though, that slashing, lack of liquid staking, and non-self-custodied staking, three things, of course, that Cardano solves, are cited by the SEC as relevant to investor risk here. In this paragraph 349, they talk all about investor risk. And those are the things they cite: slashing, lack of liquid staking, and non-self-custodied staking. Those are all things we see in Ethereum, but they're all things that Cardano solves. This is very interesting. So what does all this mean? Obviously, the SEC is sticking with Gensler's proclamation that almost all crypto assets are securities, and they were happy to take up that position to go after CZ and Binance. This means that the SEC has now attacked almost all top blockchains outside of BTC and Ethereum. If we look at the top 10 at CMC, which coincidentally is also owned by Binance and CZ, we see that they included Matic in this complaint today. They included Sol in this complaint today. They included Cardano in this complaint today. Famously, they've been locked in litigation with XRP for a long time. They included BNB in this complaint today. So the only ones left are Dogecoin, which, I kind of have a feeling they'd be happy to go after Dogecoin because they seem to be very happy to go after Elon. And Elon, of course, is a champion of Dogecoin. You've got USDC. USDC, sort of famously, when was it? Earlier this year? USDC received a subpoena. Circle received a subpoena regarding USDC from the SEC. Then you've got Tether. Then you've got Ethereum. So the only big question marks, this coin has already received a subpoena. The only ones in the top 10 that are true question marks really are Dogecoin, Tether, and Ethereum. You can imagine Tether has not been unscathed by regulatory authorities. There's been a lot of let's say regulatory focus on we'll say there have been questions. There have been questions about Tether. You could imagine U.S. regulatory authorities finding some way to more concretely possibly go after Tether, and then we're left with Ethereum and Bitcoin. Like I said, Bitcoin is not a very good target because there isn't really any central promoter for them to go after. That just leaves Ethereum. The question is, has Ethereum received a free pass here because of the whole Hinman thing, or are they just waiting? Are they just waiting on Ethereum because they want to tackle Ethereum separately because it's such a big fish? We don't know the answer to these questions right now, and we don't know what's coming next. We know there are a bunch of subpoenas and Wells notices and active investigations that are floating around out there. We've seen reports of these things, and it seems like what's happening is just this sort of slow motion war on crypto. It's slow motion. It has to be measured to mitigate for public backlash and the agency staffing constraints of the SEC. But this really does look like Operation Choke Point 2.0. One important thing to note here is that the SEC is asking for a lot in the preliminary injunction. So this isn't something they're asking for in the final decision. This is something they're asking for now. They say the commission respectfully requests that the court order temporary and preliminary injunctive relief, including but not limited to asset freezes, a verified accounting, repatriation of assets, expedited discovery, preservation of documents and information, prohibition on the destruction of evidence, and the appointment of a receiver, alternative service, and or other necessary equitable relief that the court deems just and proper. So think about that. They're talking about no assets being able to leave Binance. That's what the SEC is requesting. And granted, this whole complaint is just the SEC's position. All these allegations are just what they are alleging. It's what they believe to be the case. And this request for injunctive relief, preliminary injunctive relief, is also just what they would like. That doesn't mean that that's necessarily what the court is going to grant, but they are asking for asset freezes. They're asking for repatriation of assets, a verified accounting, expedited discovery, appointment of a receiver. This would be a full shutdown of Binance. So the SEC, it's not like the SEC is like, hey, we have this legal theory that we think you're, violating some regulations and statutes. Let's get this figured out eventually. Let's have the courts figure out who's right about this eventually. No. They want the shutdown of Binance. They want Binance shut down as quickly as possible. This, to me, is evidence that what the SEC and this current administration really want is an extermination of crypto. It's not like they want an academic exploration of these novel legal issues. They want to shut down large swaths of crypto as quickly as they can. What's going to happen next? We don't really know. Are they going to go down that list of securities and start litigating questions about whether or not each of those crypto assets is a security? Are they going to move on to other exchanges? I think it's interesting that they've gone after Binance here, but aside from like the wash trading and some of those types of fraud sort of allegations, it's kind of hard to distinguish, a Coinbase from a Binance when we think about, the allegations around the trading of crypto assets that are securities on the platform. Because Coinbase definitely trades Cardano and, a lot of those other assets too. Maybe all of them, I don't know. But Coinbase also trades a lot of assets. So, I mean, it's hard to say how the SEC's logic here wouldn't also apply to a Coinbase. And, obviously they've already sort of gone after Kraken, and Kraken that sort of controversy with the regulators already. But the same arguments could also apply to Kraken. So is this just sort of the initial salvo? Like, are they going to just one by one file against Coinbase and Kraken next? Because there's not really anything about their logic here that that they couldn't also apply to these other exchanges. Another issue is that if the SEC is willing to declare sort of all of these, they're willing to allege that all of these assets are securities. What does that mean for the more centralized VC coins? So a lot of people today on Twitter are offering their opinion that this is probably the death of VC coins. I won't go ahead and name the VC coins that jump to mind, but I'm sure you can come up with your own list of those types of coins. Those people might be right. It may be that this is the death of VC coins. And, it seems like a lot of VCs have already shifted their attention. They go where there's money to be made. And right now we're in a crypto winter. There's much, much, much less money to be made in crypto. So the VCs have kind of, shifted their attention to other things anyways. So they probably don't care. But could this be the death of the VC coin phenomenon, where you get these VC supported coins that are marketed very, very heavily, and they're very centralized, in many different ways? Could this be the death of those types of projects? Possibly. This could possibly be the death of those projects. We focused here on Cardano, but there are sections for all of those other coins as well, and many of the things in those sections don't bode very well for these centralized projects, like virtually all of the VC coins. So what does this mean for Cardano? Well, we don't really know. We don't really know what the SEC's game plan is here. Maybe they just decided to include Cardano because they wanted to allege as many, large top 10 cryptocurrencies as being securities that are traded on the Binance platform as possible. Maybe the SEC doesn't really care about Cardano. We don't know. We don't really know what they're up to. We just know they're waging war against crypto. If that's not the case, if the SEC is planning on targeting Cardano, we've definitely got a lot of allies in the trenches with us. We've got Binance, we've got Solana, we've got Algorand, we've got Polygon. These are a lot of large communities in crypto. This is a lot of people and a lot of money tied up in these communities. So the SEC would be picking a very big fight, and obviously this is a very practical SEC. They would probably go after each of those blockchains on sort of a serial basis. They would go after one and then the next one and then the next one. But Cardano would, if that were the case, Cardano would have a lot of allies in these other projects, and that would be a huge expenditure of energy and person power by an agency like the SEC. So it could be that this was the agenda here was just to go after Binance, and it's not an indication of what the SEC is going to do next. It could be, or it could not. We just don't know at this point. So, what should crypto and Cardano do here? So, all of crypto should just band together and fight this as much as we possibly can. We should get real busy in the legislature. We haven't talked about the recent pro crypto bill that's circulating in discussion draft form, but obviously, Cardano and crypto have a lot of allies in the US Congress, a lot of politicians who are very pro crypto and are doing everything they can to try to fix this situation. Obviously, crypto should band together and support those politicians as much as we possibly can. We should throw as much of our unified economic might at, changing, creating new legislative frameworks to save us from this madness. We should use as much influence as possible, whatever amount of influence crypto as a whole has. That should all be pushed in the direction of putting an end to this. That includes new legislation and the next election cycle. I saw reports today, rumors coming out that the staffs of certain politicians who are very, very anti-crypto see crypto as sort of a no-lose situation, that even if they make all the crypto people mad, they haven't really lost anything. I think that's because they feel like crypto was never on their side anyways. But I think they might be underestimating how people how much of the electorate will view this as an anti-technology stance, as an anti-business, anti-progress stance. I think crypto as a whole could push that perception of this, and that could hurt those politicians. Then we've got the administration. Obviously, there's going to be an election a year from November, and we could end up with a very pro-crypto administration instead of the current one. The current administration is about as anti-crypto as they could possibly be. And we've got some politicians in the race who are very pro-crypto. I don't want to make this partisan, so I won't get into it. But I think we've got contenders on both sides actually who are extremely pro-crypto, both on the right and the left. And there's always the question whether you should be a single issue voter in crypto or not. But I think we're going to see some very polarizing choices in this election. We've got some candidates who are very anti-crypto and some that are very pro-crypto. And to the extent we can, crypto should band together and make sure that we do everything we can to elect one of the pro-crypto candidates in that election to the White House instead of the most anti-crypto administration we could possibly be facing. Of course, we should also try to primary all of those politicians, all of those legislators who are so anti-crypto, who are, behind a lot of this, or at least in league with the people who are behind all this anti-crypto policy. What should Cardano do specifically? In this specific case, this might be a place where Cardano should think about filing an amicus brief. Cardano could file an amicus brief in this case, and there are so many different ways to attack this. But in the case of Cardano, where Cardano is being declared a security here, Cardano's obviously got a stake in whatever decision comes out of this. I think it's probably we don't know what CZ is going to do here. We don't know. CZ obviously has a tremendous litigation war chest. He has a lot of money, a lot of dough. He could fight this for a long time, just like Ripple has, maybe even more so because he's got so much cash that he can deploy to fight this thing. We don't know what CZ is going to do, but if CZ is going to fight, this might be a case where Cardano should look into filing an amicus brief. I think that Charles and IOG, they seem to be, I would guess that they are very effective at deploying assets with the right kinds of law firms to produce things like this. This might be a case where Cardano may want to look into filing a very good amicus brief in this case, especially because this isn't just a general anti-crypto thing. This is an anti-crypto thing that's also specifically very anti-Cardano. Obviously, the problem with all of this is that there are a lot of things we just